Coming to you from beyond the final frontier, it's Archaeodeath.
Archaeodeath in space! Hello everybody, welcome to my Archaeodeath live for Wednesday the 10th of January. It's an exciting live because Archaeodeath is going to the moon. I'm going to the moon. I've decided that NASA need to send me so that I can be jettisoned into space, never to be seen again. No, seriously, what we're going to be discussing in this live, and welcome everybody, is the archaeology of outer space, or one specific aspect of it. Now, there's a broader debate here to be had about how archaeology can explore the different heritages and perceptions of material culture on Earth about space and out in space, now going with space exploration. So how we represent it, reference it in the landscapes of space exploration on Earth, from launch sites to museum displays, and also out in the beyond this Earth, the creation of human material culture in outer space, from satellites to expeditions. And I want to talk specifically to you though about, as you can probably guess, the news that the Peregrine lander is out on its way to the moon, and obviously has already encountered problems and challenges. So I wanted to, if I can get up the news stories, and I think I haven't checked in the last couple of hours the latest news about the Peregrine lander, but I want to share my perspectives as an archaeologist, and I'm just going, all the news stories haven't been updated. No chance of a soft landing from Live Science from 25 minutes ago. Okay, so I want to go through some of the stories that I've been encountering as an archaeologist, and then to hopefully deal with the situation. You know, where do we go with this really? So I want to start with. And of course, this relates specifically to an area of my research expertise which is the archaeology of cremation. The archaeology of cremation past, the archaeology of cremation recent, and the archaeology of cremation future. Because at the moment, we're not sending living people to the moon, we're sending the dead to the moon and into outer space. And so this is a really interesting dynamic for us now, is showing something about our early 21st century society, that we're funding, we're sponsoring, we're incorporating the dead into, we're using the dead as a mechanism of sourcing funds, of endorsing, of franchising, if you like, and accompanying space exploration. And this interests me as a mortuary archaeologist, because the cremated dead have now gone further than than most people have, apart from a few astronauts and cosmonauts who've reached the moon. Cremated remains have gone further, so or as far. So let's start off with where should we go? How do we start off with this? I've got lots of open different folders here, and let's start with the New York Times. Right, so this is the evidence of various different concerns. So there is one of the things I've been following is very much Alice Gorman on Twitter, Dr. Space Junk, and her perspectives on all of this, because this has been an emerging issue of her research. And I want to start off with the fact that on the 27th of November 2023, Jeff Spry, writing in space.com, writes, the first Vulcan Centaur rocket will fly DNA samples of CEO and Star Trek crew. So the DNA of United Launch Alliance Tory Bruno and wife Rebecca will see the DNA soar into deep space 24th of December. The new United Launch rocket will now send its CEO's DNA into space alongside an already announced memorial for Star Trek. So and so again, this isn't simply about sending our dead into space. This is sending our imaginings, our fantasies, our science fiction aspirations and ideals into space too, via the cremated remains of the actors that played in Star Trek. Because, as well as Rebecca and Tori Bruno, the Bruno's genetic material joins dozens of memory files of cremated remains and DNA samples of its passengers. Prominent among previous announcements are several Star Trek luminaries, including Nichelle Nichols, who played Uhuru in the original series, DeForest Kelly, who played Bones, and James Doonan, who played Scotty. Series creator Gene Roddenberry and Roddenberry's wife, is that Majel or Mile Barrett Roddenberry, a recurring Star Trek actor. Douglas Trumbull, the legendary visual effects wizard for 2001 A Space Odyssey. So Arthur C. Clarke has a indirect reference here. And Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977. Also joins in the others bound for the interplanetary space, because the mission was sending... It's actually more complicated than this, because the Solstice mission, this article says, appropriately called Enterprise after the iconic starship, so the naming is important too. Will launch from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Sorry, no laughing. Okay, Space Force Station on Florida's Space Coast. ULA announced in 2006 as a joint alliance between Lockheed Martin Corporation and Boeing Corporation, and this target date will be a new shiny new rocket's maiden space flight. Also on board the Deep Space mission with sealed capsules, as reported back on President's Day in February, will be the remains of 4 US presidents: George Washington, only then names 3, Dwight D. Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy. So different articles are containing different information, so I haven't collated all this yet. This is such an amazing opportunity, and we are thankful to fly such distinguished people, Bruno said in a press release. In addition to Solstice's memorial payload, Vulcan Centaur will be carrying Astrobiotics' Peregrine moon lander, which will be gently nudged on its path towards a lunar encounter. Then Vulcan's upper stage will zoom off in a heliocentric orbit, where it will appropriately shall be renamed Enterprise Station. Okay, so you've got this separate, there's a moon destination and there's a heliocentric orbit destination, one of which is memorial, one of which is scientific research. But I do understand some of the cremated remains are also going to the moon, or were. So Tori and Rebecca will be joining the more than 200 participants from 35 nations aboard this mission of purpose, creating humankind's deepest outpost in the solar system. Charles M. Schaefer, Celestis co-founder and CEO, said in the same statement. Okay, so this is all a bit mad, isn't it? So we can go back to February of 2023, where Jeff Spry, also writing in space.com, says DNA from Presidents Washington, Eisenhower, Kennedy, and the fourth one is, of course, Ronald Reagan, will join the cast and crew of Star Trek. So this is from earlier in last year, saying that the company will include the Enterprise crew, the same names and individuals are listed. But here's where it gets really interesting, because 6 days ago, Jeff Spry, also writing in space.com, writes, Navajo Nation objects to private moon mission placing human remains on the lunar surface. So this is where this is really interesting. So the actor depositing human remains and other materials which could be perceived as discards in any other location on the moon is tantamount to desecration of this sacred space, is the quote. For better or worse, the moon is officially open for business. On January the 8th, United Launch Alliance's shiny new Vulcan Centaur rocket will launch from Kennedy Space Center in Florida, carrying Astrobotics, Peregrine lunar lander and the Solstice and Elysium memorial payloads containing human remains and DNA. 2 memorial companies, so there's 2 involved. Elysium Space and Celestis will potentially deliver a symbolic portion of remains, so it's not the full cremated urns, it's just elements, to the surface of the moon as one of their services, with Solstice's precious cargo of cremains and DNA riding on its Tranquility mission, the company's second lunar flight. The second Celestis payload will also fly on the Vulcan rocket Centaur upper stage to head out beyond the Earth-Moon system into deep space to establish the first remote human presence among the stars. Dead presence. The Celestis Enterprise flight will include cremated remains and or DNA material from numerous Star Trek icons, such as and then goes through the same information. But not everyone is exactly rejoicing over the upcoming flight. As reported on Arizona Public Radio on the 28th of December, the president of the Navajo Nation, Peregrine, is unhappy with the notion of human remains being deposited on the moon and is formally requesting that NASA postpone this January launch due to the space agency's promise to advise them prior to authorization event. any future flights. On the 21st of December letter to NASA and the US Department of Transportation, Negron expresses his thoughts on the matter. Quote, "It is crucial to emphasise that the moon holds a sacred position in many indigenous cultures, including ours." Negron wrote, "We view it as part of our spiritual heritage, an object of reverence and respect. The act of depositing human remains and other materials which could be perceived as discards in any other location on the moon is tantamount to desecration of sacred space." Negron adds that the Navajo Nation believes that both NASA and US DOT, I don't know how you say that, as the acronym USDOT, should have consulted with them before authorising a company to transport human remains to the moon. However, despite the Navajo Nation's strong objections, this technically is not a NASA-run mission. The mission will be the first launch of the Vulcan Centaur and the first mission under NASA's Commercial Lunar Payload Service, CLPS, program, which seeks to leverage private companies to help place agency-led science payloads on the lunar surface. The mission is actually a private commercial venture by ULA and Pittsburgh-based Astrobotic Technology, made possible by CLPS and NASA, who has no jurisdiction over exactly what addition payloads are included. According to Negron, this has been an ongoing concern that echoes back to the late 1990s, when the National Aeronautics and Space Administration sent the Lunar Prospector carrying the remains of geologist Eugene Shoemaker to the moon. So this is not the first time that cremated human remains have been to the moon. The first time was the remains of this geologist, Eugene Shoemaker. In response, NASA had formally apologised and promised consultation with tribes before authorising further missions carrying human remains to the moon. In that particular instance, the Office of Commercial Space, operating under the US Department of Transportation, was possibly negligent in failing to consult with tribes before approving of the launch's official payload certificate. Negron reminded parties that NASA had previously committed to notify Navajo Nation regarding memorial sites, and that the Biden administration promised to consult with tribal concerns of this nature as outlined in the Memorandum on Tribal Consultation and Strengthening Nation-to-Nation Relationships on the 26th of January 2021. Quote, "This memorandum reinforced the commitment in Executive Order 13175 of November the 6th, 2000, Negron explained. Additionally, the Memorandum of Understanding regarding interagency coordination and collaboration for the protection of indigenous sacred sites, which you and several other members of the administration signed in November 2021, further underscores the requirements of such consultation." In a pre-launch science briefing on Thursday, January the 4th, NASA representatives addressed the controversy over the payloads containing human remains being included on the mission. Chris Colbert, CLPS program manager for NASA's Johnson Space Center, said that private companies launching payloads as a part of the program, however, don't have have to clear those payloads before launch. So these are truly commercial missions, and it's up to them to sell what they sell. Colbert added, "We don't have the framework for telling them what they can and can't fly." NASA which is kind of really concerning, isn't it? I mean, what if they were sending something else into space and NASA can't stop them? Anyway, let's not go there. NASA representatives added that an intergroup agency within the US government is convening to discuss the Navajo Nation's objections. Celestis, for its part, does not find these objections to be compelling. Quote, "The regulatory process that approves space missions does not consider compliance with the tenets of any religion in the process for obvious reasons. No individual religion can or should dictate whether a space mission should be approved," Celestis CEO and co-founder Charles Schaefer said in an email statement to space.com. "No one and no religion owns the moon, and were the beliefs of the world's multitude of religions considered, it's likely that no missions would ever be approved," Schaefer added. "Simply, we do not and never have let religious beliefs dictate humanity's space efforts. There is not and should not be a religious test." Okay, so in that context, there's a bit more information and details I can share about who is actually going on the moon on this mission. It's important to say that I've just found out there's a few more additional issues of right. So there is been various scientists and archaeologists have weighed in on this. And there's also an issue of declaration of rights for what's happening on the moon and the desecration of the moon and the damage that could be done to the moon. For me, what's really interesting, I suppose, is what do we consider religious here and sacred? I mean, to assert that you're not taking on board any religious beliefs while simultaneously seeking funding, support and delivering cremated human remains to the moon and to heliocentric orbit seems to be a bit contradictory. Now, the cremated dead are not inherently sacred. It depends on the perception of the person. But the fact that our society is selecting out celebrities, ex-presidents, rich people as somehow special, we want to afford them a different dignity in death, and that jettisoning small portions of them into the far reaches of, well, the near reaches of our solar system is somehow marks them out as special. I mean, is surely a kind of sacrality. It's affording a sacrality to that distance from Earth, to that that the dead are boldly going where no person has been before. We are sacralising that space with our science fiction narratives, our naming of the launches, the labelling of payloads, the labelling of, you know, the honouring of this discourse. We are creating this sacrality. And yet simultaneously, anyone that questions that is, we don't take religion into account. Now, the Navajo argument is the moon is sacred to our tradition, so don't piss on it, basically. Don't turn it into a junkyard. And this is not the only perspective on this. Others have put forward declarations and acknowledgements that we need to think about natural environments on Earth, such as Antarctica, but also in outside of Earth, beyond Earth, including the moon, and start to set up concordances, agreements, declarations that establish guidelines for what people should do in those environments before we turn them into massive trash heaps with discarded expeditions and materials, of which cremated remains are one. So we have a series of ethical and socio-political and cultural phenomena here that are really going to be complicated. What are we doing with the dead? Why are we doing this with the dead? Which is all bound up with ideas of fame and identity and spirituality and wanting to be everywhere and nowhere, beyond place, a place beyond place. And yet also we want to do this unimpinged. Any critic of it, any qualifier, any attempts to explore this is shut down as, well, you're being trying to impose your religious views on us. So I find it a fascinating example of the how religion drives scientific expeditions and inquiries, and it funds it, informs it, and how we can shout to the rafters about how we're just interested in the science, but utterly embedded in that scientific endeavour is funding, naming discourses associated with the dead and our beliefs and aspirations for the dead, and our attempts to select out some people as special. US presidents, those 4 presidents, obviously JFK got shot, Reagan got old, Washington, who was the other one? What the heck? Why those 4? It's an odd dynamic, isn't it? So there's an interesting blog called Space Policy by Dr. Jill Stewart that has details of this, and she talks about the human remains going into space and the concerns. Because it's not just space. Oh, so it's not just cremated remains. There's also a sports drink bottle. There's a DHL package called DHL Moonbox. It claims to be non-hazardous and inert. A Bitcoin engraved on a single coin. A metal plate displaying the Bitcoin Genesis block. And there's also, I think there's 180,000 Japanese school kids have left messages on some kind of device. There's all sorts of things going with this. And now, and it's all legal, apparently, according to Stewart. I think it's all there's no real multilateral. So as the situation is far from lawless, however, as the cost of launching items continues to be reduced, some argue there are questions and discussions to be had over what exactly should be sent and by whom. And Stuart adds her opinion. My main position is that we need transparency, education, discussion and deliberation. More specifically, I would like to see the establishment of guidelines for good practice for future launches. I'm not against commercial space activity, and I also feel we need to proceed with caution and sensitivity to the fact we are establishing precedents and norms for the future. There are further discussions to be had. I mean, my perspective is, what the fuck's going on? You know, we've long seen the desire to send ashes over water out into the universe, now into orbit. But what is driving this? I mean, that is I haven't got the figures, but financially there must be a sizable proportion of this is death driven. A desire for the dead and DNA from the living to live past us going off on these various expeditions. And we can see this, I suppose, versions of this with state authorization go back to Voyager and the desire for communicate something of human civilization out there into the world. And that we want to send time capsules into distant space. But we're now sending our bodies, our own bits of our own DNA, and the dead, the people that we pick out. So I don't know. So there's that aspect, right? Then there's the indigenous aspect, that this is another, you know, is there any consultation with any indigenous groups about this? And some people say, well, why should it be about indigenous people? The moon's everyone's. Well, is there consultation with any religious groups about this at all? You know, have they thought through the ethics? Have they thought through the precedent? Have they thought through, you know, are we just going to turn the moon into a tomb before anyone actually gets to live there, if they ever will? So there's all those kind of dynamics and questions. And of course, now we've got the other ethical dynamics. It looks like looks like the lander is not going to land. They've got a propulsion system failure, and at least the last time I looked, it looks like this is never actually going to have a soft landing. So the parts of the payload that are going to go to the moon aren't going to go to the moon anymore. So not only are the scientific experiments and all the other aspects not going to the moon, but so the dead, some of the dead that were intended for that destination are no longer going to go there. They're going to float off into space. So what are the ethics there? That people signed up and sent off remains hoping to be in one burial, and now they're somewhere else. I mean, what would be the real world equivalent? You send off your remains of your loved one to a crematorium, and they say, oh, by the way, we didn't get it in the crematorium, and suddenly we decided to catapult it into the neighbouring field. There's a few corpses there. We'll get them back, but, you know, they're a bit bashed up. Or we cremated the dead, but we posted his remains to Taiwan instead, and didn't, you know, so we don't have them anymore. There's you know, the dead aren't going where they thought they would go. And that does happen in funerals. You know, we have many occasions people talk to me about trying to scatter ashes and the wind blows back on them. And that's a kind of personal awkwardness moment where the dead don't end up where you want them to. Or there are bloopers that happen in funerals, lowering coffins, you know, dropping coffins. Things happen, shit happens. But having a destination moon versus destination not moon, suddenly we've got an ethical issue there as well. So there's all sorts of issues here that I haven't really fully unpacked, but I thought I would just present you with the information I have, which may not be fully complete, but I've picked up on some of the main stories, and see if you have any other thoughts. And I had hoped that a certain representative of an indigenous group would be able to join me, but they don't seem to be around at the moment. I think they're not very well. So I'll just see if there's any comments or any questions for me, because this is new stuff for me. I'm not a space archaeologist expert, and I'm really interested. Hi Yarrick, yes, you're here. And what's for tea tonight? I haven't had anything for tea tonight. Just information for tea. That sounds like a lot of money to dispose of someone's remains. Yeah, I mean, so the point is, these are cremated remains going the furthest that any human remains have been. Although, as I said, a geologist's remains are already on the moon. But they're also the most expensive. Per pound, per gram, this is more expensive than any other funeral ever. Surely. I mean, even take the building of the pyramids, or the first emperor, all these kind of grand funerals of the past that cost you know, I mean, I suppose lives, if you're costing sacrificial lives, and some of these funerals cost more because no one's been sacrificed to go on this trip. So I suppose in that sense, they're not the most expensive. But if you take those out of the equation, these are some of the most expensive pound to gram or dollar to gram funerals you could possibly imagine. Because these aren't even the whole body. These are just tiny little flecks of a body. So the rest of the body is still at home. But to pay for this element of the body to go off into space, my mind is, you know, like I'm going, why death in space, you know, cremains of the dead. It's a lot of money. Yeah, just weigh me down and drop me in the ocean to feed the fish. Well, that's simpler. That's the way I want to go, but not right now. Hey, I've got a question for you on Medieval Chroniclers. Ben, KG, we're talking about cremation on the moon, and I want your perspective as a Norse pagan on whether the moon is sacred and we should be sending the dead there. Because that surely, it's not just Navajo religious beliefs that are being contravened, aren't they? I mean, other people's spiritual beliefs across the world, this jars with. I mean, many spiritual movements have strong climate and eco positions, and I would have thought that not using expeditions to trash sacred places or to, I don't know. I wonder what you think. It's just a bit of dust, says Chris. Yeah, it is just a bit of dust, but it's the questions. You could say that about the dead. You could say we're just a bits of dust. We're just all mainly water, aren't we? So you can say that about anything. You can do, it doesn't matter. It's only a bit of dust. It's only a crisp packet. You know, just dump that on the floor. Why don't we send 50 Gary Lineker, flavoured crisps off to the moon for walkers? Why don't we just literally send garbage to the moon? You know, dump it in space because it's expensive, ethical, and we've got other things we could be spending that money on. So there's a broader conversation about what the heck we're doing and how we're investing billions and billions of resourcing. Honestly, why does it matter? Why does it matter, Chris? You tell me why it matters. Why are we going into space at all? Why would we do that? Why would we explore in space? And why would we send the dead there? What could we also have included in the payload other than the dead that could have had utility and value for scientific research? You tell me. As a president, it's worrying that this will become a capitalist endeavour in the future. Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, death is always money, and death is always about creating space and paying for space, renting space, investing in space, as in spaces on Earth, but also now space. So death is always about capitalist venture, and most of our death industry is capitalist. It's not, everyone's making money out of the dead. It's one of the most, arguably it's the second oldest profession, but the question is, what are the standards? What are the guidelines for doing this? Yeah, and it's, I would love to be able to talk. I just as I set up the observatory. Oh God, I know. I'm sorry, Space James Bond. I'd love your views on this. I should have given you more warning, or perhaps we should have a chat another day once we work out whether this is actually going to get to the moon or not. It's not just about religion. It's not even religion, really. No, not really, is it? It's not just one religion. No, but it's about saying, well, what are we going to accept? Is an appropriate mode of dealing with the dead. We've already messed up the Earth. We don't need to mess up more satellites and planets. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be we've already surrounded the Earth with a corona of space junk, most of which is going to fall back to Earth at some point. Some bits will fall on Earth and hurt people, but very little, I imagine. Most of it gets burnt up in the atmos. But my point is, we are already doing that. I suppose the question is, when do the dead fit into this whole picture? I want my remains sent to the sun, then I'll be spread across the galaxy in 4 billion years. I mean, yeah, that's the way forward, I think. Well, exactly, Chris. It's about, we as a society are constantly having conversations about what we do, what is a proportionate use of money and resources. And the super rich have used space as another flex to find legitimacy in the gross expenditure of money to enhance their reputation. They use science for it. I mean, the only thing I'm disappointed is that Homo naledi wasn't sent to the moon and was only sent into brief orbit with Virgin Galactic. But, you know, my point is that science is being used in the performance of a particular kind of masculinity, of wealth, of power, of fantasy. And I'm not saying it's all wrong. I'm just saying what are the issues here that we need to be contending with. I don't particularly know or understand the Navajo Nation's position on this, and whether it's just one Navajo leader, elder, sounding off because they see an issue they can, make some noise over, and or not. I don't know. I don't know enough about the Navajo perspective. But what I am saying is I don't think you don't have to be a Navajo Nation member to see that there's issues here. You know, you don't have to, if there was already an issue with NASA sending stuff to the moon and the Navajo Nation went, hang on, what are you doing? Maybe the Navajo Nation are saying what many other people are thinking, and but they've got the flex to be able, they've got the power, they've got the leverage to get people to listen. But other people are saying, shouldn't we be investing in healthcare? Shouldn't we be investing in all these other things? You can always say those type of things. But specifically to do with the dead, many people can't even afford a funeral, let alone, many people will die without savings, will die without knowledge. Many people in the COVID pandemic couldn't even go to funerals. There's a whole nest of modern issues surrounding death and death culture that need to be contended with. The experience of the dying, the cost of hospice care, and terminally ill care. All of these things surely should be the paramount concern, and yet here we go. Less than Nichelle Nichols and DeForest Kelley to the moon, I don't understand from the press releases whether they were going on I think they were going to the Enterprise station, so they were never going to the moon. But my point is, into space. It's fascinating, isn't it? I don't have this is new for me. I don't have a strong, this is what I've always thought, this is what I think's going on. I'm just sort of sharing my gut reactions to what it's all about. Who had a good point? We don't take religion into account, but every planet is a god. Okay, I'm trying to get my head around that one, Arctic Pharmacist. You mean every planet has a... Is that a Doctor Who reference? Or I'm trying to get my head around what exactly your point. Every planet has a sacrality to it. Is that what you mean? It should be treated as such? If we ever inhabit the room, will these areas be left alone? Well, yeah, that's a great point, Jamie. I mean, will we... Because, various TV shows have played out future science fiction and books. Will the history of space exploration be commemorated with museums, as in Star Trek Picard? There's a museum for all the old Enterprise ships. Will there be, places, the places where the first expeditions went, will they be sort of treated like quasi museological sacred spaces? And will they then be, or will they be respected? Will there be a cemetery? I don't know. It's fascinating, isn't it? There's so many questions about, we can start to think about future archaeologies, future material cultures. What will people be demarcating as sacred or holy or just venerated? It doesn't have to be sacred in a religious sense. It can be just sort of venerated space. So Jamie, this is the whole thing. It's about thinking about what are future expeditions elsewhere. Like, we have memorials to plane crashes, we have memorials to wrecks of ships, we have memorials to expeditions to the South Pole, of memorials to mountaineers. We have all this adventure expedition culture, and we have museums back in places of habitation to honour these things, that explain these things. And will there be a similar... And how will the dead feature in that? That's fascinating, isn't it? The heavens are literally mapped in mythology, but somehow it's aspiritual. Oh, I see your point. Yes, of course. Sorry, no, I get your point. Yes, so all the planets are gods, as in the planets in the solar system are named after gods. Yes, of course. I was thinking about the planets everywhere and everywhere. You meant, of course you meant, since the beginning of scientific exploration, we have sacralised the solar system. Of course, sorry, yes, my brain's slowly catching up. You're too bright for me, all you lot, and I take time to get my ideas all sorted out. And so, we can't turn around and say, well, don't do it, don't sacralise it. We're sending stuff to Uranus. Don't make it about religion. Or Neptune. Uranus. I'll get banned for saying Uranus on TikTok Live. No, it's a fascinating... it's a fascinating issue, isn't it? You know, it's currently free. The question is, you see, just because something isn't illegal doesn't mean it's ethical. I'm sure the pharaohs didn't think they'd end up in museums. Well, no, exactly. And you know, this is the whole point. We have these debates, these ethical debates about whether those remains should be in museums. And at one level, you can make the argument it's disrespectful to past societies because they never intended that. But then you can also say, but we're learning a lot about those past societies by the fact we've studied them and we can tell people about them. So I'm not... You know, I'm not trying to do a hard line, everything's sacrilege, everything's desecration. I'm saying, have people thought this through? But they were toffs anyway, the pharaohs, so who gives a shit what they think? Do you know if it was a plan before or after the Nalede incident? Actually, you know, I think the only people who got pissed off about Homo naledi were people in the archaeological community. I haven't checked up how wider it went as an outrage, how broader it went as a controversy. But I think this was planned from before, I think. Just that final resting place may not be. No, I mean, we can't control our own remains and we can't predict. I mean, like, I haven't got specified what I want anybody to do with me. And frankly, like many people, I don't care. I think I would object to, though, is people making me into some kind of celebrity. I mean, it's not going to happen for me, but if I appeared for 2 seasons in a TV show in 2028, that suddenly becomes my fucking identity and suddenly everyone wants a piece of it and suddenly my distant relations are making money out of getting other people to send bits of my cremated remains somewhere. It's all a bit weird. As a heathen, it gets my goat. I think it's very disrespectful as an animist and disrespectful. I mean, I think a lot of people do. And as Arthur Harms has said, whether you are personally a person of faith or not, we've put a lot of effort into spiritualising, sacralising the cosmos. And we can chart that back in the archaeological record. We now know, you know, we're getting more and more evidence of ancient astronomy. Going back, it's not my area of expertise, but going back thousands of years, 5,000, 6,000 years, we've got evidence of, you know, monuments aligned on key lunar and solar events, sunrise, sunset, moonrise, moonset, various other arguments about alignment to particular stars. It gets into the realms of fantasy, but you know, we have that evidence. The question comes, and star charts are now being found in rock art and on objects. Are we... And of course folklore tells us that deep time stories about astronomical events, from deep time. So we can't turn around and say, well, no, it's just, we'll do what we want. Chris says he doesn't think it does matter. Okay, doesn't matter. Well, I mean, then that's fine, isn't it? That's simple. It doesn't matter, so that's the end of discussion. But I think a lot of people are asking questions, and I don't think it's just the Navajo Nation that should be concerned about this. What's your thoughts on commercial archaeology? Joe P. I mean, all archaeology is commercial to some degree, and commercial archaeology is the work that tends to be done ahead of development and funded in the UK by development, and it's they do a lot of amazing work and find some amazing things, but they get paid for shit, and they need better pay and better working conditions, massively so. It's a very undervalued profession, and when I'm dictator, when I'm in charge, the archaeologists will actually be paid a decent wage. Yes, Mo, absolutely. Many religions venerate the moon and the dead. I meant cremation dust. I've lost the connection. At work, but just say hello. Oh, hi, Jono. Let's skip 2024. I'm not a fan of messing too much with the moon. It's deeply spiritual, but science is important. Yeah, I mean, scientific experiments, that's the payoff, right? So the analogy with archaeology is, right, a new road is going to be built through a field, right? That road's going to happen anyway. The archaeologist doing work funded by the developer as part of a PBG 16 agreement to do excavations ahead as legislative guidelines. ahead of the construction to excavate the stuff that's going to be there. So we're destroying it anyway. There's a scientific rationale for doing that work, and it informs and enhances our understanding of the past times. So it justifies the work. It's going to be destroyed anyway. We found some important information about the past, their graves, their settlements, whatever it may be. There's a full scientific justification there, and as long as you ethically do it to professional standards, and you do it to you engage the public and you explain what we're doing, then everyone's happy. The same with the moon. If you're going to the moon because you've got some scientific experiment you want to do and it's going to do something, or is it just because Russell Brand wants to go to the moon? Actually, that'd be a good idea, as long as it's a one-way trip. No, but seriously, you know, everyone, I'm on the moon. Yeah, bye. I'll see you there. Hey, where are you going? Just keep talking, Russell. You know, someone will hear you. Yeah, okay, right. Well, I've got my YouTube. I'll, you know, just. No, I'm sorry, but you know, but seriously, is, you know, what should be the agendas setting the research? You know, or is it just like, you know, if I've seen this happen on archaeological sites. If the archaeological site is going on and there are rules set and everyone's doing it, and suddenly a celebrity walks on and just walks across the freshly troweled surfaces, walks over a burial in a golf cart, maybe drives in a golf cart, and no one says anything. Goes, oh, that's great that he's funding the dig and he's just trashed all our evidence. But that's cool. You know, for me, it's a bit of an issue. Yeah, that's why I think that we've got to think through what's going on. Yeah, hi Archaeo Wolf. I'm just ranting about moon burial crap. Yeah, that's where I've got to. I was hoping that the Rebel Rabbi would have be available to tell me from an indigenous perspective. But you know, if you've seen any views on this, I've kind of wrapped up really my take on it all. What if Russia were trying to take control of the moon? I doubt they would care for remains on the moon. No, I don't know. That's interesting, isn't it? Who's setting the agenda? It's all nice and comfy as long as America's the ones doing it, and if anyone else does it, it's like, oh, yeah. So, 200 years pass, will they be forgotten like the guys on Earth? Well, yeah. I mean, the other thing is, you know, will they just look like moon dust? Medieval chronicles, right, Ben KG, tell me about medieval, what do you want to know about medieval chronicles? So the foundations of their nation came from Troy. Why was this so widespread? Oh, because it came from the Virgil, didn't it? So it's the popularity of Virgil that spread the popularity of the Trojan origin myth, I'd imagine. So it's ancient sources, literary sources, inspiring copying of that idea of origins. The line of the Navajo took this same mindset on the other programme here. Oh yeah, okay. I just addressed that. Okay, Wolf. That thank you. Yes, I did. I read out the news story about their objections and the saying, well, you did say you weren't going to be doing this, and here you are. Oh, but it's a private company now. We can't control what a private company is sending to the moon. Well, if you can't stop them sending cremains, what if they're going to say nano robots? You know, I don't know, death robots to the moon or whatever. You know, have you not thought this through? You know. You know, it's really interesting. Anyway, I've kind of really, to be honest with you, that's all I wanted to talk about this evening, because I just wanted to rant about the moon. That you know, it's the vainglory, the arrogance, the commercial capitalist arseholery of it all. Really, I suppose is the issue. I don't think I necessarily agree that the Navajo Nation should be arbiters of what happens to the moon, but equally I don't think that NASA and their private sector buds should be really either. Yeah, fascinating topic. But for me as an archaeologist of cremation, it's a wonderful other aspect to the archaeology of contemporary death. And so I will be addressing it when I finally get around to writing my Archaeology of Cremation book. Archaeology of Contemporary Death book, sorry. Death Today. Harmless until you realise that aliens are out there harvesting our cremated remains and making an army of cyber crematobots to unleash back on Earth. That'd be a great plot for Doctor Who. Oh, they should employ me as a writer, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? Come on. If NASA is involved, it must abide by all the federal regulations in respect to cultural resources. Absolutely. Seth, we'll band together and get you that co-op funeral. Yeah. I should write this up. The Cybermen army is made from cremated human remains. That's not far off what the plot with Missy was, actually. Well, thank you so much for listening to me ramble about things I'm not an expert on, but I'm fascinated by, and I will put this up as an Archaeodeath live. I've got 2 Archaeodeath lives to put up now for next week. I've just released one on last week's live about the Cern Abbas giant. This week's live, next week's live is going to be my chat with Elio from Monday, and then the week after I'll put this one up. But and there is a regulation protecting indigenous religious freedom. The moon is a spiritual symbol. So yeah, it's all part of it's our world projected onto space, the space projected onto us. It's all let the crows take me, says Chris. Let the crows have me. That's like saying ever. Anyway, I'm just going a bit weird here, but I need to go home and actually try and be sane for a bit. But thank you so much, and nice to talk to you. And keep on archaeodeathing, and yeah, more videos coming out on all sorts of exciting topics. I've got more backed up, and really excited to share more information with you on all manner of things. And but lovely to chat, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.
Sadly, we're all going to die. But while you're waiting, why not follow Archaeodeath? Subscribe now on YouTube.